Hey guys, Dr. Rosie Main. I want to just give you a little bit about what we did last night. The Building Healthy Families workshop was awesome. I want to thank everybody who came. I know that I've been getting lots of texts and posts to let me see if we can do this live, and I'm going to do the best. Hopefully, my network doesn't cut me off. Sometimes the home network here gets disrupted. So I'll do a little bit of a 20-minute segment of last night. We had a lot of people just not only with adults but also children joining us, and we got to actually get them samples of everything from desserts that were meant tailor-made for children so that they can actually have, like we did the cheesecake, we did some truffles that are very good dark chocolate truffles that are no sugar, again, no grain. So I'm going to do this PowerPoint here with the phone, and so I'm going to try to, just talk while I'm going through the PowerPoint. So if you have any questions, go ahead and text me or post it here. My number is 859-6170, area code 208, or you can post them here, whatever you want to do. But I'm going to go through this. So I want to talk about number one, first, my kids. I know that we have twin boys, and this is an older picture, but that's my husband, John Main, who actually shared a lot of his upbringing of my kids. They, really are always with him. He homeschools them. Fortunately, with the ability for him to be with them 100%, he gets to be 100% present with them. So it's been awesome to see him just, just love what he does. He actually, I talked about last night, the practice I have right now was his. We had two practices. He ran one and I ran one, but when we got about maybe into the first year of that practice, he actually got to the point where he got real sick. He got depressed. We didn't know what was going on, and actually he was heavy metal toxic. And so fortunately, through the help of Dr. Dan Pompa, we got him healed. We got rid of all the heavy metals, and we were able to get pregnant, which we had not been able to. And so after 8 years of marriage, got pregnant, and long story short, had no clue we had twins. And when we had them, I couldn't handle two practices. He was still healing. We sold one, kept the one I have right now, and he decided that he was going to stay with babies. And of course, I was resentful in the beginning, because I wanted to stay home. But God had bigger plans. He made it work where he just became 100% dad, and still does. He homeschools. I do a little bit of the homeschooling, maybe Tuesdays and Thursdays, but for the most part, he does it. But anyways, he shared his thoughts, so I want to talk a little bit about just everything that happened last night as far as, how we started off with the boys was not my plan. Of course, having them in the NICU for 2 months, it was very hard to leave the hospital, having to leave your kids there. Going home without them was very hard, so we had to start with, making sure that they got everything they needed from mama. So of course, we would deliver the milk, the breast milk. We got sent with Child Protective Services because we didn't want to vaccinate. We basically, I'm gonna just kind of fast forward here, but a lot of the stuff that they recommended we denied, and of course we were told we were bad parents. Luckily, these kids, even though they went through a lot of hardships, they've come out pretty good, and they still struggle a lot because they were premature. They actually, had some brain injuries, and so hence we do a lot of stuff to try to help maximize their health. So they still struggle. We know we homeschool because of the struggle. One of them has a little bit of learning deficiencies, so we still have to make sure that we're always, just doing the best we can to maximize their brain health. We even not only, of course, getting them adjusted with maximizing their nutrition, but we even do hyperbaric oxygen. We do whatever it takes to get these kids what they need to maximize their health. And so anyways, because of all the stuff we've done, they've actually had a really successful childhood and still continue to flourish. So so just moving on here. So right now, you guys know that we're just in an epidemic when it comes to our children and the generation right now. It's been said that we're going to see our kids die before we do, and so this is where we got to do something different when it comes to health. So for our children, and the fact is that they're sick. There's epidemics of autism right now, learning disabilities, but everything with children. We're seeing more kids and even teenagers with anxiety issues and just bipolar issues, and many of them are medicated. And that's the sad reality is that we got to understand that all these issues that you're seeing here, from cancers to heart disease in kids and to diabetes, we're seeing a lot of kids with seizures and epilepsy and ADHD. So all these things go back to what we're doing with our culture. And so it's got to change, and it starts with you first. And so just going down here, I want to talk about pre-pregnancy, because before we got pregnant, the reason I really believe we weren't getting pregnant, of course, is number one, we got to leave it up to God first, His timing, not ours. But second, we know that sometimes we're in an environment where we're so toxic. So I myself, whether I didn't have symptoms like my husband, I still did everything during the healing stage to go and detox my body, get rid of heavy metals. We actually traveled to Spain to go see a doctor named Dr. Hilu, who helped us out a lot in detoxing and getting rid of heavy metals and all that kind of stuff. But Lyme was a big issue for my husband, so that was another thing that we had to overcome. But we started to think about if we were going to get pregnant, and when that was going to happen, that we wanted to make sure we thought about every little thing, when it came to decision making. So I show this slide because there's so many things to think about. The way you want to have the baby, whether it be a water birth, whether it be with a midwife, or it all is up to you. And that's the beautiful thing is you have the decisions to make. But nourishing our bodies, I know that one of the biggest things people always ask me, so what are those things that I should be eating during my pregnancy? So I want to talk a little bit about that. Really quick here, the first trimester, getting in a lot of the micronutrients, which are the vitamins and minerals and the antioxidants your body needs. And then the second trimester is really focused on macronutrients, really getting in good quality fats. And all throughout the last semester, with fat being the biggest thing that's getting formed as a child, you want to make sure you're putting lots of good quality fats in your diet, from avocados to, eggs, a lot of good quality nuts and wild-caught salmon or fish. So just eating good nutrients. Again, I'm going to be really, going through this. But another thing that I want you to consider too, as far as your decision making with your spouse, is what's going to happen when the baby's here. And so not only how we're going to have it, but then also little things that people typically don't really focus on. The fact that right now, everything is emergency crisis driven care. So we want to talk about just even little things like the time that you're going to get the clamping of the cord. I know that a lot of people rush all these things, and so we want to make sure that you understand that the volume of the blood in the baby is very very important. A lot of times what happens is we clamp this cord way too fast before it's finished pulsating, and so you want to get everything from the mom into the baby. And so that's going to be something that you want to consider talking to your midwife or whoever's there. Another thing that a lot of popularity right now with pregnancies is, what do you do with the placenta? And I didn't get to do this. Of course, I had my kids in the NICU, which they didn't allow me to keep the placenta. But placenta encapsulation is very popular. And if you look at animals, they eat their placenta. And of course, this sounds a little gross, but you can put it, you can encapsulate them, and you dehydrate it in a dehydrator. And there's recipes for that for you to follow, but something to consider too, because of the nutrients you get with the placenta. And so that's just one thing, again, to discuss with your spouse about those things that to think about when you're having a baby there's so many decision making. And so, and balancing back after a baby, as far as a mom, which is considered the fourth trimester, you want to make sure that, you go back into not only nourishing yourself while you're pregnant, but even after. Are you going to continue to not have coffee, or what foods you're going to have while you're breastfeeding? And so that's one of those biggest things. This is a great picture to know that as you breastfeed, and this is the biggest thing with breastfeeding, is that there's a bonding that occurs with mom and baby. And this is one thing that I only wish I would have been able to do, because of the fact that I had to leave my babies in the NICU in an incubator. They're actually, I'm going to talk about my kids real quick. They were one of these kids that, I'm going to really quick, but these babies are miracles. I mean, literally, these kids were twin-to-twin transfusion babies. And so what happens with these kids is that they're in one placenta sharing the same sac, the same food. So they they don't survive. One of them is symbiotically feeding the other one. And so one of my kids is a lot smaller than the other. But yet, they were in an incubator. They were together. I made sure that they stayed in that way, because typically these kids don't survive. One of them doesn't. And so they're lucky. But I didn't get to breastfeed. I was taking my milk, or we were taking the milk each day, day and night to the boys, so that they didn't get processed milk. And so, but this right here shows you your body's bonding with your baby will actually trigger what the baby needs are. So let's say if the kid is, if your baby is sick, your body will respond to that and give it whatever immunology that your body is perceiving the baby needs. It gives it to the baby. So this is how powerful this bonding is. And so, which brings me to the point of talking about, like, if you can't do that, what do you do? So this is typically what they get at hospitals. If you can't breastfeed, this is what most moms give their kids. And you guys got to remember that all these have so many chemicals, and you can't really see what's in there, but when you see a list of just foods like this in a milk, there's chemicals and all these things that you can't read. One of the number one things to avoid with Enfamil and Similac is corn syrup. Corn syrup is just so toxic. Hey Kaylee, I just saw that you're watching. That's awesome. But anyways, goat milk. Goat milk is one of those things that we encourage moms, if they can't buy breast milk from another mom, then you make your own. There's a link I can send you. It's from Mount Capra, which is a way to make your own homemade milk. And there's a link called Mount Capra, CAPRA. But also goat milk, you can go ahead and put this with coconut milk and make your own. So, and we can give you the recipe if you need. Another factor to consider when it comes to raising kids is co-sleeping versus sleep training, which both have its pros and cons. So when it comes to co-sleeping, people love the fact that you get to bond with your kids. So there's no good or bad way. It's whatever works for you. And I think that so many moms feel pressured that they have to co-sleep, or they shouldn't be sleep training. It's going to be up to you as a mom and your husband to decide that. But there's so many pros and cons. And then here now, talking about just as we go into toddler age, and I'm not going to show that video, but I want to talk about just the little things that come up as they get into the toddler age. And I know that a lot of us have been trained to look at suppressive healthcare as something that we do for every little ill. And so when it comes to our children's health, I know that with my family, my kids are taught to know that everything that happens in their bodies is a body doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason. So when, for example, my kids get a fever, they get a high five, because we know that we're high-fiving them for the fact that their body is so superior and knows what to do, that God put a power within our body to heal. And so we want to make sure we honor that. And so we always say the power that made the body, and they respond heals the body, and they know that their symptom is a body doing the right thing at the right time to overcome. So for instance, most of the time, with the overuse of medications for every little ill, like ear infections or fevers or stomach aches, a lot of kids get over medicated with antibiotics right now. And so this is one of the things that's causing secondary issues. And so we want to make sure you understand that a lot of what we're going to talk about not only applies to our children today, but it also applies to you as an adult, because the fact is all this applies to the whole family. And this is what we want to make sure you understand, that these 5 essentials that we talk about with our office are mainly intended to remove interference. That we're going to be talking about mindset, how you raise your kids with their mind. Secondly, of course, we know that the nervous system is primary. Number 3 is nutrition. And number 4 is getting your kids active with exercise. And lastly, of course, toxicity being a huge factor. So number 1, I want to talk about mindset. And I know that, many of you know that first and foremost when it comes to mindset is that we got to renew our minds when it comes to the thinking with raising our children. My dog is barking outside, so I have to close this door. But in Romans it says, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I know that with children we can actually create their minds to where they become that person that God created them to be. So if you think you can do a thing or can't do it, you're right. And this is Henry Ford. So we have come to a decision, my husband and I, that we're going to make sure that we guard their spirit, that when it comes to our kids, even though they have their deficiencies because of their brain health from all the issues they had with hypoxia being born, they're going to be compared. They're going to be compared to each other. They're going to be compared to the world, and we want to guard their spirits, and that's why we decided to homeschool. But I want to talk about just limiting thinking or limiting beliefs, and that's why this concept of bringing your kids to a point where their experiences are only going to make them better. So, like for example, I'm just going to talk about this concept of like riding a bike, for example. If a negative person believes that I can't ride a bike because I get hurt each time when I fall, then their value, expectations, and experiences and what they experience from that circumstance will create their future outcome of their mindset. So if, for example, they don't want to, or you don't want to, have experiences because of pain, or if I talk to my patients about diets, and sometimes people say, I don't want to do a diet because I've failed all the time. So if that's your value, is to avoid pain, then every time you go into a situation where you're going to try to do something and you fail again and again at this, then your experience is that every time this happens, I will get hurt again. And then you build a belief system of frustration and defeat. Versus the positive belief person says, I can ride a bike. I can do this. And so their value is different than the negative, but this is going to be fun, and it's all about self-improvement. So the expectation when you do fall is, I will get better at this, and every time I fall, I only get better. So I went farther this time. And lastly, you feel confident and encouraged. And so when I talked about this last night, this is where, like, going back to just with kids' health, if they get a fever and you respond as a bad thing and you say, like, for instance, you're sick, or even when patients come into our office and say, I'm sick, we change their language. We change the fact that they shouldn't say they're sick. They're actually expressing health. And we tell them their expectations that every time you get sick, your body's immune system actually gets better. And so it gets stronger, because now your immune system gets stronger. You're going to be able to defeat other things. So now their thinking is not about, being sick. It's about getting stronger. So every time they get a fever, we high five them and say, power's on, we get them adjusted. We just change their thinking. So, these belief systems that we're teaching our kids will create their mindset in the future. So for example, excuse me, when we tell our kids, we're sick all the time, or like, they don't even know the word sick. They just don't know the word can't. They don't understand these words because we don't use them in our household. We change our words, and when you change your words, you create different thoughts, and you create a different mindset. So, that's one thing, is guarding their spirit, and this is where we got the ability to homeschool. But if you don't homeschool, you got to just remind people at the end of the night, whenever you're talking to your kids at night, so what was the opportunity in this? If they had a bad experience, always go back and talk about what was the opportunity in that experience of that bad thing that's going to just make you stronger. So I have these little magical little white dust here because we really feel that the Holy Spirit surrounds them, and so we guard their spirit, and we pray each night for them that that nothing crosses through their little spirits that taints them, that makes them feel less than. So number 2, I want to talk about the nervous system. And I know that as a chiropractor, you guys know that when it comes to having healthy kids, the number one system that develops as a baby is the nervous system. It's the number one thing that, as an embryo, you're creating the spinal cord. And so you want to make sure that you honor that as children. We talked about the number one thing we check when kids come in is their atlas, which is this area that I'm pointing to. The atlas is the area that we primarily check. Now, I want to talk about ultrasounds first with the nervous system, because if you have never been told about ultrasounds, and this is where, we know that so many times people are not informed, but ultrasounds, typically when you put this wand of heat internally into encapsulated, bag full of water, you're going to heat up the source. It's kind of like a microwave. And in essence, you want to make sure you understand that ultrasounds are just creating more heat in there, altering the issue of the nervous system. So I would really consider you guys thinking, again, together with your spouse, about not ultrasounding. I know that I had no idea that there was twins when we had them, because we had never been ultrasounded. And so I got in trouble at the hospital. They kept telling me why I didn't do an ultrasound. If I would have only known that these kids were twin transfusion babies, that they could have, maybe done something about it. But really, can you really do anything? If you have a Down syndrome kid, would you even alter what you do for your children? You can't do much about it. Would you abort it? The fact is that I don't know about you, but I would not have changed my plan. And actually, not knowing that they were twin transfusion babies probably was a good thing. I wasn't stressed the whole pregnancy. So when people do ultrasounds, sometimes they tell you that they have to know what's going on with the baby, but truly, if you really think about it logically, you can't do anything, and what you get is what you get, and you thank God for it no matter what He gives us. And so this is where you gotta understand that all these decisions that we make for our kids. Now, I'm talking about the nervous system primarily. Now, these 2 kids here, I want to talk about Nathan first. Nathan came in as an autistic kid who had severe autistic tendencies with aggression, irritability. Every sound, every noise drove him nuts. He has been getting adjusted since he was like 4 or 5, and has now actually have contracts to be a model. He's an actor, he's a singer, he's very talented. So just after getting adjusted, clearing out his nervous system, and also working on his diet, we got rid of all the grain and the sugar, and now he's doing amazing. Another testimony here is this little boy here, who was constantly suffering from breathing issues, asthma, was, taking this inhaler, and we were able to dump this in our drug freedom trash can after he had not been suffering from asthma for over 6 months. And so when he was getting this continuously, again, clearing up the nervous system is key. And so we want to talk about checking that atlas, and when it comes to kids, and which we'll be talking about that here at the very end of this PowerPoint. But the next thing is nutrition. I'm going to fly through these. Some of you know, the basic things with nutrition. Getting rid of all the sugar, which is the main thing that we see with most of kids. Is they're having just too much sugar. So the thing is that we are constantly bombarded with these ads about just giving our kids more sugar. I don't know about you guys, what you do at your home, but my kids don't even watch TV. We really just have them watch either videos that we decide what they're going to watch. But ads are just bombarding kids with more and more marketing on what they should be eating. And so some of these things my kids don't even know what it is, because they've never had them other than water, or sometimes green juice that we make them. We do an apple cider vinegar drink that we do for our kids that we showed last night. Bragg's apple cider vinegar is one that they love to have with water, of course, diluted with lemon, which is a very good drink. We gave samples yesterday of that. You guys probably know some of the things that, the marketing with some of these like Subway ads is that this is good for you. Everything from toxins to even yoga mat material, things like this one right here, azodicarbonamide. This is a chemical that's in yoga mats. I mean, would you want to give that to your children? So when it comes to being an adult, the fact is that these issues like cancer that we're seeing, not only in adults, but now epidemics in kids, is that our environment determines our health. And we believe that sometimes cancer was given to our children, but it's not that cancer just arises. Is the fact that how we've been doing to our own health as moms or dads that now is also creating issues with our kids' health. So we see epidemics of cancer in kids. And the fact is that cancer, doesn't make you sick. It's your sickness over time that creates cancer. And now we're seeing it just in kids, even though they're so young, because we've been sick over years as parents. And then not to mention now these kids are getting bombarded with toxins from the minute that they're born. They're bombarded with the vaccinations and medications are being given. And then also not to mention all the chemicals in the foods, like I said, the Similac, the grains and all this genetically modified food. So you got to understand that we got to go back and change what we're feeding our kids. We talked about yesterday, just a little bit before, talking into the toddler stage or the child stage or even the teenage, as far as fats for babies, just going back to that, like what would you feed your toddler? Like what's the first food? I would say the first thing you should be giving them is avocados. And avocados are so good for their neurology and their brain. And so it's very easily something that kids can implement. Very easy for them to eat without teeth. And so I would start after breastfeeding. Of course, avocados would be the number one thing. And even coconut oil, adding it in the foods you give them. So if you do decide to, for your child, give them some like squashed sweet potato, I would put lots of real butter, Kerrygold butter, or coconut oil to make sure that they're getting the quality fats that they should be getting. Many of you have seen these slides here where margarine and all that, it's not even attracting the ants or the flies because it's synthetic. When we talk about just good quality meats, we guys, some of these slides, some of you have seen before if you're patients of mine, but grass-fed meat. When it comes to vegetables, making your own. Here you see our kids, we have some planters outside where we go and each spring start to plant some vegetables so that we can make our green juice. This is one of the green juices that we make for them, and we call it their green monster juice, where we put cucumber, kale, celery, spinach, turmeric, green apples, and lemon, and they love to have this on a daily basis. So we start the morning off with either a green juice or an apple cider vinegar drink for them, and then we have breakfast, which is typically consists of a smoothie, which we'll be talking about in just a bit. So this is a couple of their faces. Ever since they were little, they've been drinking this, but they just, this is what we do. It's just something we typically stay up. I talked about last night about, go through these here really quick, some things that my kids have never been exposed to, and this is one of those things that we just have never taken them to McDonald's, and luckily, they don't even know what it is yet, or hopefully never, because they haven't been exposed to that. Another thing is my kids don't know what, like hot dogs are, or those kind of things that most kids have been exposed to, Oreos. So, they love just real food, God food. So we're talking about Frankenfood here. Frankenfood is everything that is made by man, and it's basically been altered with processing. Some of the biggest factors that are occurring right now with ADD and autistic kids is the fact that we're having a lot of sensitivities to gluten and casein. So I want to talk about gluten first, because last night I mentioned that, it's not just the gluten, it's grain itself. The fact if you can just get rid of grain altogether, not only just be searching for gluten-free foods, grain now, because of it's genetically modified, is just so inflammatory. But gluten sensitivity can lead to mental issues, and inflammation in the brain is what's causing these learning disabilities, and also issues with sensitivities like ADD and ADHD and autism. So getting rid of those inflammatory things. Casein is another thing. So many kids are allergic to cow's milk because of the casein. So this histamine reaction and this problem with inflammation in the brain is what's creating these, sensitivities with our kids. And so getting rid of the milk. I know that a lot of the things that we talked about last night is we add either coconut milk or hemp milk to the smoothies, but it's just changing what you're putting into the foods that they eat. Pretty good stuff to add too is vegetables to their diet. We all know that. Hopefully we just now act on it. And here are just a couple of things to look at when it comes to just shop with a doc here in Saturday. This Saturday I'm actually going to do one for our patients in Winco. But if you look at the front of the ad, like here you're looking at a good source of protein, USDA organic. You want to look at that, but the most important thing to look at is the ingredients. So if you look at the ingredients, you have organic, roasted, unblanched Valencia peanuts. Well, Valencia peanuts are great. They're actually better than most peanuts because they don't have the mold. But the roasted part, I would still stay away from roasted peanuts, because again, you're altering the type of fat. So, but if you make your own, like you could go get raw cashews, raw almonds, put them in a processor. You can add some sea salt, some maybe honey or real natural honey, and make your own almond butter. But the marketing goes back to reading the ingredients, not the front of the label. And anything that is hard to read, if you can't read it, then don't eat it. So get rid of it. So for example, right here you have Skippy, where if you read the front, it says no trans fats. And if you just look at the ingredients, the first ingredient is freshly roasted peanuts. But then again, they add soybean oil, maltodextrin, and hydrogenated vegetable oil, which just made this into a very bad type of peanut butter. But in the front it says no trans fat, and the reason they can get away with that is because of the amount of content in the serving size. So they can lie to you in that manner. So all these kind of foods that have all these ingredient lists that you can't read, you would want to get rid of. And I mention this because this is found in the health food section. So just because it's in the health food section doesn't mean it's actually healthy for you. So just quick things to learn. I'm going to just run through this top 10 toxic foods to get rid of for your children or for your kitchen. Get rid of commercial salad dressings. I know that some people think that they're eating healthy because they have a salad or they give their kids salad, but it's the additives that are in the dressing and the croutons and all that that make it bad for you. So make your own. We make our salad dressing from olive oil, a little bit of we add like apple cider vinegar, which is very good. And then my kids like us to add a little bit of honey. And then we add some turmeric and some garlic. And they love that one. It's like a turmeric dressing, which we're going to have at our recipe night. Last night we gave a recipe for gummies that you can make at home, because you guys know these things are just not only toxic with the sugar, but all the chemicals in there. But we made these last night. So we had all you have to do is either, here it shows it with watermelon. I did it with berries. So just put berries in a blender, blended it up, added some collagen, gelatin powder, like 3 tablespoons, had some stevia and some lemon juice, and made them just basically, you heat that up and you put it in the freezer and you make your own gummies, and so they're pretty darn good. So my kids love these. These are other things that you can actually have, like if your kids want a treat. I know sometimes, they want something different. So we buy these coconut bars, and you can find them at Fred Meyer's, Natural Grocers, the Boise Co-op. But it's basically dark chocolate and coconut. And so all, stevia is what's used to I think to sweeten. And then you have coconut bliss ice cream. We love coconut bliss at our household. Coconut bliss is made again with coconut milk, and I think the only thing that I don't really like about it is that it's sweetened with agave. I wish it wasn't. Agave is not as healthy as most people think it is. Just the processing that it takes to make agave is still not the best, but every once in a while we'll have coconut bliss if we don't make our own at home. Deli packaged meats, the fact is all these, sandwiches that we're making for our kids to take with them, they're filled with just chemicals, not only the chemicals they use like nitrates, but even things that they put to avoid bacteria from growing. And so this is just stuff that you would not add to your kids' lunchbox. You would stay away from this stuff. We talked about grass-fed meat last night, but last night I showed actual sausages, grass-fed meat sausages that we get at Fred Meyer that are very good. So another thing to avoid for your kids' health is white bread, and most people know this already. So it's just basically flour and sugar and glue. So get rid of that. Some options again. At the stores, you have Ezekiel brand, which is sprouted, and it's found in the freezer section because it goes bad if it's outside of that. So that. Another one we use for our kids here and there is Malay chia bread from Udi's. So other options, you can make these. These are really stiff, so you would slather them with butter, with Kerrygold butter. And put them on the grill, and then you can add avocado and some sprouts, like green sprouts, broccoli sprouts. You can, they love it with sea salt, that, and like a sandwich, like a cheese sandwich. It's raw cheese, some avocado, butter with a grilled toast, and they just love that as a treat as well. Going down here, and lastly, of course, when you are going to have vegetables, get away from all this Monsanto sprayed glyphosate infested food, which is so hard for us to avoid. But here in Idaho, we get the luxury to get really good local farmers at the farmers market. But these are some things, if you can't buy organic, to just be aware of. You can have the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. Some things you don't have to buy organic, such as things that have a husk you wouldn't eat, like a avocado or banana or things like that, like watermelon, which the Dirty Dozen, like berries and things that you eat the peel, then you would want to buy organic. And you can always wash these, but if you can, get organic, okay? Butter, again, get rid of margarine. You know, go back to real butter. That's the biggest thing, is butter's not bad for you. It's good, but it has to be real butter. And so this is what we use, Kerrygold. Kerrygold is one of my favorite butters. It's very tasty, but it's grass-fed. And so then number 7 here, of course, with kids, you would want them to make sure that they're off sodas. Not only does it ruin their teeth, but it's very acidic, creates a lot of issues with just brain health. And don't go for of course, the diet stuff. It actually makes it worse with all the chemicals, aspartame. This is another thing I'm seeing with kids nowadays, you know, just at coffee shops ordering all these kind of weird looking drinks. This unicorn one here, just so much sugar in there, but not only toxic sugar, it's basically filled with corn syrup and lots of chemicals and the dyes that they use for these you know, pumps of loaded condensed sugar. It's just crazy what kids are doing. The other one that I see a lot of kids, especially teenagers, hanging out at is Dutch Brothers. It's one thing to have coffee with, you know, whole cream, but when you start adding all these things in the back, pumps of vanilla and, you know, caramel and all this kind of stuff, it's just toxic stuff. So get rid of that. And definitely for teens, I'm seeing that so many of them are on these monster drinks, which, I mean, literally are killing kids. I mean, they're having you know, heart attacks. So make sure your kids are not using this, but first that you're not doing this. If they watch you do it, then they're probably, you know, gonna do it themselves. Gatorade, working with athletes, and you know, a lot of times here with the FCA, I see a lot of kids walking around with Gatorade after sports. And if you know, most of you know, as far as these things are just filled with not only high fructose corn syrup as a sweetener, but also just the fluorescent colors, which are filled with just, you know, dyes like that are very neurotoxic and issues with brain issues with our kids. And so go for coconut water, especially if they're in sports, you know, things like coconut water that are not sweetened with fruits, just plain coconut water. If you see the ingredient there, it's just one ingredient. We love to make our kids infused waters, which will either put strawberries, berries, lemon. Again, we add the stevia. This is my favorite stevia here, new stevia, but it says alcohol-free. This is where it's the real deal. So using that. Ditch the sweeteners. You guys, some of you may know, some of you don't, but sweeteners are actually neurotoxic. Aspartame actually creates inflammation in the brain and not good for not only kids but for anybody. So get rid of that. And genetically modified foods, of course, like for example, well, I'll talk that to you guys here. There you go. So dairy, again, get rid of dairy if you can. If you are going to have it, you want to get to the most raw form and with high fat. Do not go for the skim milk or the 2%. But other options, and the best options, are almond milk or coconut milk. Our kids love hemp milk. This is, if we are going to give them dairy, we do raw. And so this is one of the cheeses that we love. Grass-fed cheese, and this is another brand here of grass-fed milk. We don't use that, but just for examples for you, this is what we use: organic coconut milk. Now, we don't get it from a carton, we get it from a can that's BPA free, because you don't want the, I mean, this is the real deal. It has no other ingredients other than coconut milk. There's no carrageenan, there's nothing like that. And then we basically make smoothies for them with that. And last night we had samples of different chips, like ancient grain chips, and just samples for them to have that's non-grain chips that are also made from beans. So I'll show you some of those packages in here when I go to my kitchen cupboard, so I can show you what's in my kitchen. And so this is just the stuff to get rid of. This right here, you have a sample of blue chips. These still have grain here, these corn chips, but they're non-genetically modified. These tortillas sometimes we use for being Hispanic. We make tacos. I love, my kids love tacos that I make, but we do it with grass-fed Myself and my husband, we use a leaf of a lettuce and do tacos, but for my kids, we'll do these with the raw cheese and just everything a taco typically takes. Examples of snacks for kids. We do a lot of homemade popcorn in a kettle. We don't use, of course, never use a microwave, get rid of that, but we'll use coconut oil, sea salt, and butter. And just this, I mean, snack is something that they just love to have. Lastly here, with the exercise being one of those things that, you know, kids need. One of those things we've made a decision in my household is to not give them an iPad or an iPhone, and we know we're going to keep that probably until maybe when they're 15. That's probably something that we still have to talk about, but we don't have them. They've never used a phone or an iPad. So this different, you know, they use an actual computer and they're typically sitting up upright so that they don't have bad posture. So that's, you know, something you have to decide in your household, how much computer time you're going to allow your kids to have. But, you know, we really want them to get as much imagination and play in and exercise. And so here's a good diagram of just, you know, the neurology behind exercise and even getting adjusted is the mechanoreceptors in your joints and your tendons, you know, create a neurofeedback loop to your brain called an efferent loop that goes up to your brain. Your brain then sends an afferent loop down back to your body. So you constantly, the more you move and the more kids move and are active, they're growing their brains. I mean, literally, you're making your brain stronger when you're active. But when you're sitting down and not doing anything, your kids are just like on a pad or a phone all day long, they're not growing their brain. Neurologically, their coordination minimizes. So you got to get them moving. You know, we started them doing CrossFit when they were little. I mean, they were 3. We had them get into Taekwondo for some of the discipline aspects of it. They've been doing wrestling, gymnastics. You know, we get them, since they were little, now they do motocross, but, you know, we had them on these type of bikes where they're, you know, developing their cross-crawl patterns, but also their neurology, stimulating their cerebellum, getting them on rocks, like unstable surfaces. I mean, they've had their falls, and luckily we're both chiropractors, but the fact is that, you know, this is how they just, you know, get better. This is them here last week, you know, while we were in the hills, you know, they use these kind of bicycles. They're called trial bikes, so it's not an actual motocross bike. They do have those as well, but we've been getting them on these for like climbing the rocks that you see here behind them, and they just love to do that. So lastly here, if you see this image, and some of you may know what you see, some of you don't, but this is how most of the world, you know, we're just brainwashed or blindfolded. If you can't see the cow, there's a cow here. If you follow the ear, the nose, okay, so now you see it, hopefully. So this is what toxins, you know, basically do. They're hidden everywhere. I mean, toxins are not only just when the minute we wake up, from our toothpaste to the cleaning products, they're everywhere. So you can't avoid them. You can't live in a bubble. But the fact is all these chemicals are basically destroying our kids. So it's not only in the food, it's in the chemicals that you use. So for example, for babies, baby wipes, please get rid of those. Just using an actual cloth if you can. You know, maybe buy 7th generation, but it's propylene glycol that's in these things. It's antifreeze. Basically, you're wiping your kid's bum with antifreeze, and so that's not good. And so, you know, the top 5 things, just really quick here to get rid of as far as some of the things is, you know, if you're on a lot of medications, maybe start looking at what you can get rid of. Household products, I'm just going to go in through these really quick here. Just change what you're doing. 7th generation is one of the many things that you can look into. Teflon cookware, get rid of it. You know, tap water, microwaves, get rid of those. Guys, these chemicals are creating a lot of havoc with the neurology, and right now we're seeing more kids than ever on, you know, these medications like Ritalin. So this is when it comes to getting rid of medications for kids, I can't tell you what to do. That's going to be between you and your doctor. But once you start realizing that this is basically an amphetamine, which is, it's like next to cocaine, and so this is the things that you have to be aware of. You can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. You got to start looking at what you can do to start changing. So please ask me if you have questions. You know, we'll direct you to what pediatricians are the ones that are more apt to work with you with getting off these things. The same thing goes with vaccinations, guys. Part of Health Freedom Idaho, I'm one of the on the board of Health Freedom Idaho. Our goal is to make sure you're aware that you have a right to decide what you want to do with vaccinations, but you know, you got to be informed, and so we're continuously informing our members on that. Please join Health Freedom Idaho and help us with the effort. But vaccinations right now are the biggest thing that you can take control as a parent, and you have the right in Idaho to do so. Just know that right now, by the time a child is 6 months old, they're to be injected with 48 vaccines. And this is old. This is in 2002. Now it's actually 89 rounds. And so this is where it's just becoming an epidemic. This is one of the things in the 80s. It was very little, you know, maybe 10 vaccinations. Now we're having up to 70 or more vaccinations, and I think the last one was at 89 rounds of vaccinations when you count them all. So this is becoming an issue with our children's health. So make sure that you're understanding that the vaccine whole principle is that, you know, you want to induce immunity to all these issues. But the fact is that when a child, by the 5th week in developing the baby, the thymus is open for business. It invites the stem cells to learn to become T cells. So in other words, you got this Th1 arm of your immune system. And so when your baby gets exposed to a virus or bacteria, it will then develop what's called a B cell, which is a memory cell to fight off and ward other infections. But if you don't build this kind of like an army, you don't get strong, you're always going to have to need a booster. So this is what a Th2 response is, which is a vaccine-induced immunity, where therefore you never build this immune memory cell, so you're always weakened. So you always need a booster, and therefore you can't fight off chronic diseases like cancer. So this is where, you know, even just having a normal birth, like a vaginal birth, when you pass a baby through a birth canal, it stimulates the Th1 branch of your immune system to action, and it actually gets the necessary bacteria from the mom, and it starts to act on the baby's immune system, not to mention the birth the breast milk. So all these issues we're seeing with kids' health deteriorating is because we're inducing this. We're actually the problem. We are creating our child's health to diminish. And then before you know it, then they're put on Adderall. And it just saddens me that all these kids that are put on these drugs are just creating more antipsychotic issues. Bipolar issues, and then they're put on antipsychotic drugs. And drugs are never the answer, guys. And so this is where you got to start looking at what's causing these issues. And lastly here, of course, I'm just going to, all these foods are just toxic. I'm just going to go down this so I can finish. You know, there's solutions out there. You know, make sure you know that, you know, there's BioRay is a great company that we use to try to help detox some of these toxins, because you got to unbind them. Get your nervous system, get their kids' nervous system checked for sure. You know, don't ignore your kids, guys. I know sometimes people look at chiropractic only for themselves, but start acting on your children. I mean, they're the future, and so get their nervous system checked. You know, you can go a month without food, days without water, you know, maybe minutes without air, but you can't go a second without nerve supplies. So you got to make sure you get them checked. This little girl right here, one of my little babies I love so much. This little girl had a cessation of breathing. She had seizures, and we've been adjusting her here for the last 6 months, and everything stopped. She's actually doing amazing, and you know, no medications for seizures. Just a precious little girl. Another autistic kid here who came in here with just a lot of aggression, irritability, didn't even want to look us in the eye, and was just looking down the whole time, never smiled. Now we're getting him adjusted. If you see him here, he's on a vibration plate, which is, it actually increases mechanoreceptor activation to his brain and his cerebellum. Doing amazing. Of course, I work with a lot of athletes, FCA athletes, with being the USA team doctor for USA Wrestling, and this kid is a state champion and a regional champion. Amazing stuff that we get to see with our kids. I love the fact that these kids have no you know, disbelief. They just know that they know that they know that when we adjust them, we turn that power on. And that's what I love. Like this kid here, cerebral palsy. The mom comes here with the wheels in her kid with cerebral palsy. The minute that we just start adjusting this child, you know, he smiles. He starts making these noises. It's just beautiful, you know, to see. Just kids love getting adjusted. Make sure that, you know, this is my favorite story right here, and I'll end with this because the fact is that, you know, Valerie, before she was even born and her mom was pregnant, her mom started to care while she was pregnant with us. Her mom learned all the stuff that we do for kids. She basically never vaccinated her kid, never, you know, this kid has never seen a medical doctor, really actually has never been sick. And, you know, she still gets adjusted. She's the same age as my kid. So we were both pregnant at the same time, her mom and I. And this kid's just like an example of what it is to be a chiropractic baby and grow up to be one. And so this is, it's beautiful to see these kids. So, you know, there's nerve interference that occurs from, you know, the falls of kids or just things that they do, sports. So get their spines, we get them checked, get, you know, the x-ray that we need to determine what's going on if need be. But these are just warning signs in adults that we see with a lot of people, you know, ear infections, one of those things that we see a lot of in kids, and colic. As soon as we adjust their spines, and specifically the nervous system, I know that this picture is a little graphic, but the atlas, which is the first bone of their spine, and this is the most subluxated, like if you look here at even a C-section, this is a C-section, the amount of pressure used to get the baby out is crazy. So just making sure that we check the C1, which is that atlas, which has to do with the vagal action of all the body. And so you got to make sure you get that checked by a chiropractor. And, you know, just start understanding that, you know, once they get adjusted, they get into a wellness mode. And not only that, but their immune system improves. So I'm just going to, lastly, again, more cases of just kids. So this one here, I'm gonna show you real quick. Chris came in and brought his cats. He's actually another kid that was autistic, actually nonverbal autistic, and would actually hide in one of our cabinets every time he came in because, again, it was too noisy sometimes. And so we started setting out separate appointments for him. But now he's been getting adjusted. He's actually, I think, 15 now. This is when he started when he was younger than this, and still brings us this cat to get adjusted. And he always provides our farm fresh eggs now. He has chickens and does that. This is just an example of our kids playing video games. We put them on these little wobble cushions. So they're stimulating their nervous system, so they're not sitting down, they're standing erect. So if they are going to play the Wii, that they're actively involved. If they do that, you know, they're CrossFit here. They're showing off their handstand push-ups with their coach. So just lastly, I want to talk about this case right here. And this is Masha and Dasha. And this is in the 1950s. I just want to talk about them because I'm going to end with this, and the fact that the philosophy of chiropractic is amazing, is that the power that made the body heals the body, and everything flows through the nervous system. Now, Masha and Dasha in the 1950s were conjoined twins. As you can see here, they share 3 legs. They share almost everything. They share reproductive organs, they share intestines, they share a bladder, and the only thing they have separate is their hearts. They share the same blood, the same immune system, and they do have separate nervous systems. So when one would get sick, the other wouldn't. And this is where researchers actually started looking at them, because when one would, basically not be feeling good, the other one was feeling fine. And so they couldn't figure out, why would one have, a cold and not the other? And what they finally figured out is that the only thing they had separate was a nervous system. That the one that is slanted to, where she had more of a scoliotic kind of spine, was the one that would get sick the most. So this is the power of the nervous system, that if there is interference in the nervous system, your body's not going to function. And so structure determines function, and function determines healing. So to this day, these twins, one of them is constantly always, sick. And so this is where you got to make sure you understand the power of the nervous system and the power of chiropractic to remove that interference. And so lastly here, guys, just make sure you flip over here. So get to the next talk. We have a Shop with Doc at Winco, and then the end of the month we have our recipe night. So thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, again, tap in here. Thank you guys for joining us. I see Leanne here. Hi, Leanne, Denise, Sabina, Kaylee, Jennifer Aniger. Dr. Jennifer is an amazing chiropractor here in Boise as well. She sees lots of kids. We love Jennifer. So thank you for being with us, Jennifer. And so just continue to share this stuff with others, implement it in your household, and bless you guys for joining us. Bye-bye.